Welcome to the BUSR here for NSC, brought to you by Gridfinder. Today we'll be heading over to Sebring, and I am joined by Max. How are you doing tonight?
Hello, how are you? What an event we've got in store for us today. We've got 75 minutes racing around the very bumpy track of Sebring, and it's going to be one of the, well, hopefully one for the ages.
Yeah, and coming into round number 2 here at Sebring, it's definitely a very different track for BUSR to go to, coming straight off of the back of Bahrain. Very bumpy compared to the rough but at least smooth circuit out in Bahrain. But the one key similarity will be the fact that we'll be heading towards the night, though not starting in the night like we did out at Bahrain.
Yeah, that's something to look forward to for the drivers as well, because guess what? Your braking zones, well, you got braking markers, and in the dark, that can change. You may miss your braking marker, you may just blatantly not see it. So on the braking zones, that will be definitely something to look forward to, and a new challenge for our drivers, because Bahrain is made to be raced in the dark. There's hundreds and thousands of floodlights lighting that track up. You really don't need headlights. But around Sebring, well, that's more of a traditional circuit, and it's not necessarily made for driving at night or a 24-hour race or anything like that. It has a couple, but it's not made for it. So that's definitely something to look forward to, where the headlights will be, will be very important to have them on and working.
Yeah, and with the first round of action coming up will be the qualifying. There will be a 20-minute session. However, we will be splitting the GTs and hypercars so that they don't run into each other on track. The first 10 minutes will be those GT cars running out on track for you today. Into the hypercars, rounded out when finished by that 75-minute race at the end. Though I do want to quickly say, last time out, the GT field did end up playing a bit of a big factor in the hypercar race result, with a little bit of issues coming out for the BMW driver in terms of getting in the way as lap traffic.
Well, we know from endurance racing, especially Le Mans, where you got, well, in Le Mans, you got three classes. In this, we've only got two. But making sure the faster car gets past the slower car cleanly, that is so vital. I can't say it enough. But when you got a faster car, there's lots of different rules in different series. But in Formula One, you got the blue flag. So it's simple. The slower car has to move across for the faster car. But in races like endurance racing, where there's multi classes, it's down to the faster car, so the hypercars, to get past the GT cars cleanly. Simply because the GT cars, to keep up the pace that they need to fight with everybody else, has to use that entire track, whilst the hypercars really need just a little bit of the track and can be so much faster than the GTs. But here we are, qualifying is just about, well, just starting now for the GT class, and we see the Lamborghini first one out on track.
And that Lamborghini of Alexa will be that key driver at the front of the GT field. Absolutely stunning and dominant performance last time out in that black and blue Lamborghini out at Bahrain, cleanly far at the top with the cute little Uru symbols at the side of that car. But hopefully some of the other drivers can give a bit more of a challenge last time out, as we do see many returning drivers in terms of Wally, Binder, Gora as well. Last time out, the McLaren, easily the most common car seen. 3 of them were in the track last time. However, no Daniel, who was in second place in the GT category, out in that Mercedes. But there is a different Mercedes out on track this time around, being in Chong. But as you can clearly see, there's Adam McEwen, one of those McLarens who will want to replicate that at least standard midfield result that did go ever so cleanly. But here, looking through the grid as well, as Aaron Chong is representing his university's team here with the Legion Sim Racing, as we do have multiple different groups. You have the current university students, the alumni from universities, and then coming in to this season, the opening up to external affairs as well, all competing in their own slightly separate divisions.
Yeah, we got those divisions, but really, I don't think when they're on track they're going to care much about that. They're just going to try and race the people around them as hard as possible and just try and get them the position I've had. But it's something that they'll be looking forward to, seeing the different classes within the classes, or the divisions as you call it. But yeah, it's definitely something. But what I've noticed in the last 2 minutes we've had cars out on track, look how bumpy the surface is. These GT cars are so low to the ground and the suspension is so hard. Basically, harder the suspension, faster you can go. But that also means like that you may make a few more mistakes, and that could have been caused by a bump. Just unfortunate. It's one of these tracks. It's incredibly old, founded back in the 1950s from an old World War II airfield for the US Air Force. So it is very old. We still got some of the same tarmac that they had back then as well. And yes, this may not be real life, but they keep it like this. On board with Alexa now, starting his lap. See that change of colour of tarmac? Yeah, that's going from the old original landing runway to the proper racetrack round, where you normally get a little bit more smoother and a little bit more grip. So far though, relatively clean, very sensible with track limits, so it'll be something to watch for Alexa later on.
Yeah, Alexa will definitely be looking at the top of the score sheets, but setting a 2:02 as the first lap time is a decent, just benchmark level lap time. But the main big difference you'll see coming out of a BUSR LMU qualifying compared to what you will see out in F1 is the fact that the track ramp up and just being out there trying to find a clean lap is so much more crucial as you burn down the fuel in comparison to what you find in F1 games where you just want to set that one lap because the tyres will just fall away from you afterwards.
Yeah, the tyres are very different to different categories across the world, but these ones are really special. Also, they've just brought in the new compound of Michelin's, which, well, I've not driven them, but apparently it's very difficult to get them in the working window. But when you do, you're really, really grippy, you're really, really fast. But if you go over that limit, there will be mistakes, there will be lockups, there will be going wide, losing the back end, losing the front end. So it's really important to keep that in a range. But Alexa will be crossing the line in just a moment's time, and that will be our benchmark for the rest of the field.
Obviously, Sebring, having WEC and IMSA races in real life in previous seasons, being no longer on the calendar and being replaced by COTA, but still brought here for the BUSR for its iconic and amazing but bumpy circuit that we do see. However, with a yellow flag on top, we do see Alexa still setting a personal best and going 2.222 seconds ahead of McDavid with a 2:01.356, and that is a very strong lap time.
Yeah, it definitely is. I'll be honest, I'm surprised that we got a lap time. Oh, that is pushing the limits there. Losing the back end, getting a slap there as they touch the grass. But anyways, they keep on going. They keep on going, that McLaren, in a straight line as they'll cross the line in a moment's time around the crazy, bumpy, incredibly quick turn 17. Look how much the car is moving as well mid-corner. And that is an incredibly fast corner as well, as they will cross the line, see where they will end up. And yeah, I don't think they actually improved in the end.
Potentially also getting a track limits excursion and not slowing down just enough, but is that BMW of Gora looking for a bit of a better time out compared to last time. Struggled heavily at Bahrain, trundling around the back of the circuit, but gives them plenty of room to try and find an improvement here at Sebring. Very different characteristics of the circuit. A lot of people would say that Bahrain can be a bit lousy at times, as it's three huge straights and a middle sector straight, combined by a couple of twisty corners and turn 10. The drivers just hate. Whoa!
Whoa! And round the BMW goes.
Trying to get onto the curb, extend that track as much as possible, but finding the difficulty of the curbs, and we'll have to take a reset towards the pit lane, and hopefully we'll have enough time to go around again. But with only 3 minutes and 35 for the GTs left, unlikely to find improvement. Another driver not looking to find improvement is Freddie, who's down 2.19 seconds. Currently struggling out there in that Porsche, but will have enough time to try and find one more lap as they are around this back end of the circuit.
Yeah, watching Freddie there, the back end was, well, simply not happy. He got quite a few snaps of understeer, one after the other in different directions. So maybe he's changed the setup in that Porsche to one that's simply, well, as you can see through the timings, he's 1.2 seconds down now. Isn't quicker. It'll be interesting to see actually round turn 17, a very quick corner, see how well that back end is planted through the faster stuff compared to the slower stuff. And you can see the correction and going extremely wide and touching the wall at the exit. That's not going to compromise him too much. But again, he's not, well, yeah, it's a 2-minute 5, which isn't really an improvement for him. But that's okay. Gora now coming out of the pit lane after that late spin. Currently 3rd place, and that, well, I guess this will be an out lap before he will try and get a quick lap in before the timer goes down. This is going to be extremely tight with just 2 minutes and 10 seconds left on the clock for these GT cars. He needs to get a move on because he's still got the long turn 17. Oh no, is this? No, this can't be a fast lap yet. He didn't have time, did he?
I actually think that the exit of the pit lane is positioned so that you can go straight onto an out lap. If they're using the pit lane exit that I think they are using, if they can, because when they was here at WEC, if they ported the pit lane exit that WEC was using, it'd be the one at the back end of the circuit rather than the one at the start of the circuit, because that exit and entrance was what IMSA used.
Yeah, so
it
must be
just getting here, but they use the IMSA track exit, so you can't start a lap straight away, rather than the exit that they used during WEC, which is a little bit unfortunate for Bottas having to rush around to even try and get a lap time in. However, it is at least more accurate to what you would see traditionally out at the circuit, and a bit more fair in terms of losing lap time compared to that alternate pit exit. But we're seeing quite a few yellow flags, quite a few yellow sectors as drivers are finding it real hard to find consistency on this circuit. But that is the one key thing with this circuit. It's not just bumpy, it's really, really technical as well. That just, once you get into the corner sections, besides from this pit lane section of the circuit, it just seems like you go into one corner that leads straight into another one, and you don't get a break on the steering wheel.
Yeah, with these GT cars as well, yeah, they got a massive rear wing on the back and they got dive planes and front splitters. It may look like they may produce a lot of downforce, but I don't think they do as much as they look, or at least that rear wing, I think, does produce some sort of downforce, but not a huge amount. So that will be very much interesting to see how much these cars are sliding compared to the much higher downforce hypercars later on.
Yeah, the hypercars will be coming out on track very, very shortly as the drivers run out of time in the GT3s, will hit that RTG and get themselves back into the pit lane, as Adam McEwen is nearing the back half of the circuit, so seems to be committing onto the lap. But here we see one of the two Toyotas who ended up winning the race last time out in Lucas Fischer's hands, who perfectly demonstrated the advantages to having yourself out on track and just saving that energy to make sure you find yourselves on track at the optimum time, using as little fuel as possible to save time in pit road. But it's down to a couple of drivers who had a lot of better form in qualifying, the main one to watch being Scotland, who is the pole sitter from last time, but also Xander Coffin, who here at Sebring is in the car that is currently the fastest for this circuit.
Yeah, the Cadillac is relatively quick, but also the Toyota as well. It's got quite a small wheelbase, which may help in the slightly more technical sections, especially turn 3, 4 and 5, and then on the back as well with 10, 11, 12. But the Cadillac has got the power. It's American. It's practically got a muscle car engine in the back of it. It's incredibly quick. And I've got to say, if you ever get the chance to listen to it live, it's incredibly loud as well. When I went to Le Mans last year, in the campsite, you couldn't hear any other cars. They all blended into one besides the Cadillac and the Aston Martin. Both of them cars sound incredible around the streets of Le Mans. And of course, around, well, the track everywhere in the world. I doubt they just put a special exhaust to make it sound good around Le Mans. But anyway, as we get to see these hypercars, purple sector 1, purple sector 2 for Sander Coffin, it'll be interesting to see what that Cadillac can do, as they've just got one more corner to do. The bumpy, notorious turn 17, turning an early, long radius corner, car jumping up in the air from the bumps on the road, exiting the corner, getting as close to the barrier as possible, crossing the line in about now up into a net P3 for now, 1.2 seconds behind the leader in the Ferrari.
Yeah, Zubat is a driver who last time out had a bit of a poor qualifying, but ramped up into the race, found really good consistency in terms of pace, and really found lap times improvements as we continued going on. But Lucas Fischer and Scotland, both of the Toyotas, finding themselves less than 2 tenths down on that Ferrari at the moment, finding very solid lap times in the 148 mids at the moment. But we've still got Green out in that Lamborghini yet to set a lap time as of yet, one of 5 cars in this hypercar category, as James has already came into the pit lane, but Lucas Fischer finds a purple first sector with an improvement of only a slight margin, so it's the rest of the circuit where they're losing out into that Ferrari, so they really have to try and find themselves a lap time improvement. With Green in that Lamborghini really struggling and not even beating out Gates in that Lamborghini GT3 car at the moment, will definitely be wanting to find some lap time improvement.
Yeah, well, lap time improvement is a lap time. So if you're really quick in one sector and really slow in the others, I know I'm stating the obvious here, but it's not going to be a great lap. You need to be a really consistent driver in every single sector to improve and get a faster lap time. So if you're really, really quick in one sector and really, really bad in the others, you're not going to qualify very well. But if you're pretty good in all three, that is where your money at. As we're on board with Fischer, round turn 17, the final corner on the track, back down to the main runway that they used to fly the B-17 bombers in World War II on, crossing the line around about now. And it is a slight improvement, I believe, but currently P4 as a driver behind just gets a little bit faster, but I'm not entirely sure who that was. I think it was Coffin.
Yeah, Sander Coffin finding 1.6 seconds on improvement on their first initial lap, cutting their time all the way down to a 148.1 and providing a little bit of a challenge to everyone else. Last time a little bit off with the pace compared to what the Toyotas could produce out in Bahrain, but totally different circuit, and with the new tyre model that is still evolving for these hypercars and the drivers still adjusting, lap time is going to be easily shaved by all of these drivers as they keep building that confidence. And Sander just finds even more confidence on this lap. 2 tenths the improvement through that first sector already, and charging and thundering around really with the Sandler Cadillac around this Sebring circuit that right now still in daylight, but by the end of this race will be turning towards nighttime. But now as we go on board with Green, who was struggling so hard, still not able to find a lap time improvement, and down in 6th position at the moment, should be boosted back to the back of that hypercar train, but really struggling to keep this car nice and neatly tight to the corners as they head through the rest of the sector 1.
Yeah, I think Charlie Green might have one more shot at getting a clean lap in after he has completed this one. As we've seen, there's been a couple of mistakes this time around. This will be a practice for the faster track later on. He's, a second down at the minute. Definitely work to improve. It'll be interesting to see. I think he must have made a mistake earlier on to be so far down and about 14-ish seconds behind the leader Coffin. So there's got to be time on the table for him to find. Currently net 6th place. That will drop and get closer in just a few moments' time. He'll be completing sector 2 right about now, and he has gained a fair bit of time, but still fairly back down.
Yeah, clearly having some kind of issues in the second and middle sectors on their previous laps, which will give them that lap time improvement and put them only slightly adrift. This will be a huge improvement in lap time, but still leaving them a bit of a margin for improvement compared to the rest, who are only spread by 5.5 tenths at the moment. With that Ferrari gaining time as we
Oh,
see a spin and into the wall for Charlie Green, who will have to return to the pit lane, and they see their chances at a lap time improvement slipping out of their hands. But it's James in this Ferrari who's actually thundering through that middle sector with a 1/10 improvement, really trying to take the challenge to Zander, who both of them have woken up compared to Bahrain and are fighting for this qualifying pole position, and will have a couple more laps in their belt, but will really push that circuit all the way to the edge. Let it run right, use that little bit of corner, and will find a lap time improvement. We'll find a further nearly 1.5 tenths in that last sector, and put 3 tenths the margin to Sander to have to find in that second sector.
right, we're just about to get a replay of Green's incident around turn 17. Again, that corner is incredibly bumpy. I'm surprised that we haven't seen more issues around that part of the track so far today. We've just seen the one big spin from Green. Turn 17, incredibly bumpy. It might have just gone a little bit too wide, hit a bump that nobody else has hit yet, and just spun the car around, unsettled it, and it's simple. It said no. As we get the replay right about now, going through turn 15, 16, we're going to hit the long straight heading into turn 17. Now, what I'm looking for is how the back end reacts to maybe one of the bumps. That could be the cause of the issue. He turns in incredibly quick. I don't think he's braking that much either until now. You can see the nose dip, hits the bump. Yeah, there we go. Round he goes, straight to the scene of the crash. So yeah, I think turning him really early, braking later, you can see where the nose dipped down. That means there's less weight on the rear axle. Hit a bump, round he went. It's a error, and it's one of the errors that are relatively common around this track. Now, Callum Scotland in that Toyota, the second Toyota at the minute, 8 tenths of a second down for his current lap time as he goes through turn 17 right about now.
You're trying to find that little bit of lap time improvement, now coming in with a custom livery compared to lap time out in a stunning set of colours, mind you. But we're wanting to put that colours to good use with going up to third position, but still 6 tenths of a drift from that Ferrari of James. He was just absolutely found amazing pace here at Sebring, but still good to see that the field spread isn't too far apart. With only 25 tenths, we do see Charlie Green going towards the line and finding a huge improvement for themselves. 1.3 seconds off of that pole time, but still at least able to finally find a green lap and hopefully able to find some kind of consistency going into this 75-minute race where they will really need to iron out these issues.
Yeah, that's very much needed for Green, Charlie Green. Firstly, because he gets one more place. Secondly, it's for confidence as well. If that was his last lap, crashing at turn 17 and he's thrown straight into another race, then his confidence will be broken. He'll be cautious into turn 17 and he'll lose the back of the pack. So for Green, that was incredibly important to get up into fifth place.
Obviously, with this race, you do, with the hypercars in comparison to the GTs, you do have a hard and medium set of compounds available to you to use, whereas the GT cars just have that one set of tire compounds to use. But crucially, they still have to, with the 2x tire wear, have to make sure that they make these sets of tires that they do have last the entirety of the race. Especially if you lock up, you're going to really start to wear them out at this level of circuit with the bump. It absolutely terrorizes your tires. So I wouldn't be surprised to potentially see all the drivers maybe try out the hards, but typically in these shorter formats of races, the medium tires are good enough to make it to the end.
Tire strategy is definitely something that we'll be looking. Oh, Charlie Green hitting another wall there on his. I imagine that would be his final lap. That's really unfortunate for Charlie Green to be making contact with that wall. It'll be interesting to see because I wasn't actually paying much attention to how that happened. I don't know if you got anything there.
Yeah, no, I feel like Charlie Green is pushing just a little bit too harshly through that last sector, clipping the bumps very, very heavily, which is sending them into that wall. Sadly, on a consistent occasion, 2 out of the 3 final laps that they had conducted, ending within that wall, which really will sting them heading into the race. But we'll be around shortly. But is there any other pre-race strategies that these drivers may be thinking about?
Well,
Well,
yeah,
yeah,
you
you
got
got
the
the
issue
issue
with
with fuel as well.
it's a
It's a
balancing
balancing
act
act
after
after
all.
all.
You
You
can
can
either
either
push
push
really, really hard,
use a hell of a lot of fuel, use a hell of a tyres, but there's a good chance you'll be pitting earlier than everybody else.
So we
we
got
got
to balance it out with tyres and fuel, lifting close into corners, gentle on the accelerator as well as you exit the corners too.
Welcome back to the BUSR here for LMU as the drivers load on in and get prepared to drive here for the 75 minutes, 1 hour and 15. That is once you convert it into hours. We do have 12 drivers here today with the hypercars up first. That was James on pole by 3 tenths over Xander Coffin in the Cadillac, followed by the pair of Toyotas in Callum and Lucas Fisher, rounded out in the hypercar category by Charlie Green, which coincidentally leads us into Alexa Gates, who dominates in the Lamborghini once again, leading in front of a Corvette back at home in America by one of the multiple McLarens, who then gets followed by the BMW, having a much better performance here so far, rounded out by McLaren, Mercedes, and finally for Porsche at the back of the grid, who will round out the grid here today at Sebring, as we are moments away from the race starting, as these drivers will have to try and warm up the tyres as much as they can. But it's going to be cold on those tyres. They do have tyre warmers in BUSR, but even still, sat on the grid, sat at low speeds, they're going to lose a bit of that tyre temperature, which is going to make these first few laps very, very treacherous.
Yeah, turn one, that will be all about judgment and how everybody else reacts around you to turn one. You're going to need a little bit more room. You're going to be sliding a little bit more. Your brakes are going to be colder as well, so your braking zone is going to change.
And that is for the first few laps. It's all going to be changing as we start to get the countdown.
As we are getting ready here for BUSR, the cars will start finally rolling away from their stationary positions round at the back of the circuit. They will line up side by side in dual file to come around this final corner, which will give the Lamborghini a little bit of clean air to the side, but will put them at a bit of a disadvantage, as both Toyotas, who led the way out in Bahrain and found themselves trickling down the order, making contact with each other in turn one, will hope not to make contact again, and will hope to try and get past the Cadillac and Ferrari out in front of them today, who will both be racing for position. No title cards on the line. This is round number 2, and Xander trying to replicate another second place, or even make that one step further with a win on their hands, starting from second place. But as we approach the line, the lights will eventually go to green, but as they now finally reach the line, they will get ahead, and Zonda gets a nice little start alongside that Ferrari, and the driver gets a penalty straight away on the start, jumping just a little bit ahead, but Zonda able to keep it on the outside of the Ferrari, will be squeezed towards the outside, but gets amazingly late on the brakes, but the corner just fades away from them, and their exit speed is going to be hindered, opening up that one Toyota going down the inside as they try and make it work around the outside, but instead end up in the gravel, end up spinning out as well, nearly into the tyre wall, end up seeing the entire GT field passing them on by as they slip down the order, and the two Toyotas breathe a sigh of relief that they got through cleaner than last time.
What an absolute nightmare start from so hopeful, going round the outside of turn 1, looking like they could make the pace up, to being behind the whole entire GT field that they will have to manage to slip through as well. We've just got a replay of that start. You see side by side the Cadillac round the outside of the Ferrari, Scotland's Toyota as well trying to get a nose in as well. The Cadillac, to be fair, keeps a nose in through turn 2, round the outside of turn 3, locks up there, goes deep, turn 4 and 5, compromises Scotland, and the Toyota tries to get through, simply oversteers or understeers off, goes into the grass, spins around. That's your day done. Well, not really a day done. You've got another 75 minutes to try and catch up to the back of the field. Hopefully, for the sake of the other drivers, that the two Toyotas will start to battle it out. Scotland versus Fisher. Fisher in that more camo-esque livery, I would say. But that will be something to watch out for the rest of the day, as we've got a little battle going on in the GT field as Gates in that Lamborghini keeps the lead.
Yeah, Gates trying to pull away again like they did last time out in front, but we do get Wally having a good start again, starting at the very back of the field, but 2 times out, now able to make their way up into 8th position and cutting through the traffic on the colder tyres and making them work for themselves. They just need to find this pace to find consistency in this race and just make it work for them on a longer scale, unlike they did out in Bahrain. But Coffin has a recovery drive and a half to make back for themselves to try and get through. But we have seen a couple other issues for some drivers. Gora dropping down and DNFing from this race already, clearly hitting some kind of issue off on track. But it's not just those. Aaron Chung also finding issues out on track, and McEwen, who have both slipped drastically off the back of the field, leaving the front few drivers being Alexa Gates, Mukdaviti and Binder racing for the top 3 positions with a gap already forming behind.
Yeah, as you're talking there, Coffin is making his way through, just getting past Gates now. Clean air, 20 seconds behind Charlie Green. So that's something to watch out later on to see how fast Coffin could catch up to the back of that Lamborghini, who we did see make quite a few mistakes in qualifying. Hopefully for him, that was just qualifying mistakes and won't happen again in the race. As you say, nobody's ever perfect, and you learn from your mistakes. But I remember a book when I was a kid, and the slogan was, making a mistake once is human, making a mistake twice is just a little bit stupid.
Yeah, you always get a chance to learn from your mistakes, and this is one hell of a race to get a chance to learn from your mistakes. But I do feel a little bit of the issue for Xander did stem from the fact that they are on cold tyres and just underestimating how much less grip they will find compared to the lap they got in qualifying. Also just sitting in the pit lane as they did for quite a bit of that back end of qualifying, maybe finding themselves a little bit cool in person as well. But what I'm expecting to see is what we saw out in Bahrain. Callum and Lucas both setting very similar lap times in the same machinery, trying to outdo each other based on energy levels, which last time out Lucas Fisher absolutely used stunningly to come out with the race win, able to save so much time in the pit lane. But currently, actually the driver using up the most energy, which is the complete opposite to what they did out in Bahrain.
Yeah, Also, further down in the GT field, you're talking about Chong having issues. They have been through the pit lane as well as McEwen, so hopefully that was a quick early repair. But it's a little bit strange pitting so early and just a few laps in. That's something that we'll keep an eye on. Is that a scheduled pit stop? Did Chong just want to pit really early to get clean air? And look how much Fisher is pushing his Toyota right now, using the track and a little bit more, but as long as it's just a little bit more and nothing else, then we'll be okay. And we see the McLaren already lapped as they leave the pit lane.
One interesting fact is Chong and McEwen both did end up picking drive-through penalties. That will be why they would have gone through the pit lane, as they both had jumped the start of the race, picking up those penalties and hurting their chances in this one. But still, an hour and 9 minutes. This isn't going to be over in any time shortly. So there's always a chance of the drivers make mistakes, or they find the pace, or save the fuel to keep themselves in this one. But Lucas Fisher really having to extend this circuit at the moment to keep up with Callum Scotland.
Yeah, thing is, there isn't a manufacturer difference between these two drivers. They're both running the Toyotas, which means it will simply be on driver skill. And as we just saw on the energy readings, Fisher is using a lot more fuel and a lot more energy, so we'll probably need to pit out at least a lap early already. It's about what? Where is the percentages? About a 2% difference. Now that doesn't seem a lot at this stage of the race, but that could be huge later on, as we are only about 7 or 8 minutes into this race so far. To have a gap like that, that is quite sizable. Green as well, clearly deciding to go the more steady pace, saving the energy, saving his tyres. He might even grab a pit stop on them as well. That Lamborghini, I do wish we kept that Lamborghini in the World Endurance Championship and IMSA. It looks so good, but there was just too many issues with the Lamborghini, I feel.
And also the fact that they wanted to prioritize on the American sector as well. Still competing, I think, in IMSA last season, though this season pulling back a little even further. Unfortunate that their commitment levels wasn't fully there, nor coming from Porsche as well. The entire Audi sector now leaving that of the World Endurance Championship and committing themselves to alternate championships, with Porsche re-upping in Formula E and Audi joining into Formula 1 as a manufacturer. But down in the GT field, we got the McLaren and the Corvette racing it out with P number 2. You're finding Binder find a little bit more consistency and pace right now at this back end of the circuit, and is really making a run onto this Corvette now, potentially finding themselves in this slipstream, is helping them out and finding consistency to get behind this beautiful and a little bit of a reference to K-pop Demon Hunters in that Saja Boy Corvette that they are running. But they've still got to be careful with this last corner. McLaren's going to try and focus on that exit speed to give themselves the run. But the issue here at Sebring is there's a lack of heavy braking zones like there was at Bahrain.
Yeah, well, braking zones equals overtaking opportunities, and if there's less braking zones, there's less overtaking opportunities, so you say. But there's always ways round the other driver if you find the gap. I think, yeah, we got another DNF. Oh, that's Green and that Lamborghini DNFing out of the race. The second victim of today. We got 10 cars remaining out of the original 12 between the two classes. One DNF in each, which is a real shame for Green in that Lamborghini, which means we just got 4 hypercars remaining in this field.
Yeah, only having the one DNF last time early into the race, this time already racking up a further 2, as we're seeing Aaron Chong again. Both Aaron Chong and McEwen seemingly picking up second sets of penalties coming out already, which forces them back down pit road and really hurting their race back into this one, dropping them 70 plus seconds off of 8th place, which is really a struggle for them now. Zan looking forward to the grid though for hypercar field. Lucas Fisher gaining some time back on Callum Scotland as the tyre wear increases, but going wide on that corner and needing to be careful of track limits and on that exit will lose them some of that lap time, but they did end up gaining. Xander Coffin, 22 seconds adrift on this gap, but when we looked at the energy last time around, we did end up seeing that Xander had a lot more energy than Scotland and Fisher, and will be interesting to see if he is able to keep up the extra energy saving for the duration of this race, as it will end up paying off in that final stint with a huge gain in pit stop time. But with the rate that we're seeing them burn through energy, it will be interesting to see if these drivers, as we see Lucas Fisher having to cut the circuit, getting uncomfortable on that curb. Very much so. But yeah, no, currently Xander Coffin still ahead on that energy saving, and if they are able to make that strategy work, they may find themselves getting back into this race in the pit lane.
Yeah, the pit lane is going to be vital for this round, well, for any round in the World Endurance Championships or any other endurance championships. Being in pit road for as little time as possible is really important, because filling up the car takes a lot of time for these cars to fill up, and we keep on getting this battle between the McLaren and Corvette. I absolutely love this, because I remember Qatar last year in the World Endurance Championship. There was an immense battle for the last hour between a Corvette and a McLaren, and we basically got it over again for second place this time round Sebring. Slipstreaming is going to be really important, as we do have high speed, long, not as long as Bahrain, but we do relatively have long straights down the back straight into turn 17, obviously the start finish straight as well. Then we've got exit of turn 5, we've got the kink of turn 6 into turn 7, that's a relatively long straight. So that'll be something. And we got a Mercedes that has been spun around, that is the 74.
Yeah, Aaron Chong really struggling out in that Mercedes, hoping for a better performance than this one, I would dare hope to say. But now the Corvette slightly going on defensive lines. The one big benefit that you find in the hypercar category that you don't end up seeing out of these GT cars is the ability to save that virtual energy while behind the car in front. Due to the electrical engine on most of the LMP cars, especially the MDH cars, that all have that hybrid system attached, but we do only have the Toyotas and the Ferrari from the hypercar category, so they will have that hybrid system as well. They will gain a benefit. If you're in the slipstream, you could choose to use a little bit less energy and just extend your stint via just the slipstream benefit. Whereas in these GT cars, yeah, you can save a little bit of fuel, but the virtual energy tank that they are forced to run typically means that saving fuel isn't necessarily a benefit.
Yeah, you're talking about the difference between a hybrid car and a non-hybrid car in the hypercar category. The huge thing is, I always thought, well, if you've got a hybrid and you've got the extra boost of electricity, wouldn't you just be so much faster than everyone else? Yes, but you will be obviously using more electricity out of the virtual fuel tank. And secondly, the petrol-powered engine actually slows itself down as soon as you put electrical power. So you'll never ever have more than the specified power you're allowed to have through the balance of performance. So hypercars in the the hybrid cars in the hypercar class, yeah, they got a slight advantage through fuel saving, but not so much. Oh, and that's Chong again spinning around in his Mercedes. Be interesting to see if that was a similar cause as the previous spin, possibly a bumpy track. Chong is new to the championship as well, so he may be making these sort of errors just because he's slightly less experienced than everybody else. This battle keeps on heating up between the McLaren and the Corvette. We've got the Ferrari hypercar gleaming in the mirrors of that McLaren, getting past the Corvette, both relatively seamlessly, not hindering any three of those cars. So this battle between the Corvette and the McLaren can keep on going with previous fastest laps last time around. Could they do that again? I very much doubt it with that Ferrari hypercar, but it is definitely something that we could look into but this battle definitely getting a little bit closer. McLaren seems a lot more braver on the brakes as well.
Yeah, that Toyota trying to cut through this traffic, easily slices through that McLaren, losing no time at all. Meanwhile, this second Toyota getting held up just a little bit, but Scotland ends up getting held up by the Corvette, which brings them a little bit back together. And this is the dance that you must master to be a successful multi-class driver. The bigger the field, the more difficult it will become. But when you're racing a driver, you need to master your ability to get through traffic and lose as little time as possible, as we see Fisher slightly closer than he has been prior at this part of the circuit to Scotland across the last few laps due to his navigation of traffic. And we do see Scotland locking up, and his right opened up the opportunity for Fisher to be right on that back end now. This is the closest he's been for a little while now, and may finally find himself having an opportunity.
Oh,
but
no.
the Corvette goes around. The Corvette has spun it in the back end of sector 1 into sector number 2 and lets through that McLaren of Binder. Luckily, far enough ahead of Freddie Woolley that he doesn't end up dropping 2 positions, but will lose out drastically in that battle for second, though this race still isn't over with 58 minutes left remaining.
Yeah, that's a real disappointment for the Corvette there, making, I imagine, error, spinning the car around, costing him a solid second place. It seemed like he could hold off the McLaren, at least into the pit stop stages. Oh, that's a late move from, I think that was Scotland getting past Gates, as we see Chong going back into the pit lane. And I imagine that could be the last time we see him today, which will be a real shame, as he could be a third retirement of today. But yeah, for these hypercar cars and drivers, it's so important to try and navigate these slower GT cars to try and get through the field as cleanly and efficiently as possible. Now they've got past Gates, they may have a little bit more breathing space for Fisher to try and catch up to his manufacturer teammates of Scotland. And I say manufacturer teammate, they're not really teammates at all, they're just driving the same material, the same oh my god, word just gone from my head. Yeah, I'll go with that. Yeah, driving the same machinery, that's the word that I was looking for, not material, machinery under them. It's just got the same badge as well. It'll be interesting to see now Fisher trying to climb up the field to get another step on that podium. But you were talking about earlier trying to navigate slower traffic, and it is so vital. But I always imagine, you know, when you're in a traffic jam on a motorway, and there's always this one crazy usually BMW tinted windows, music blaring loudly. Sorry, I'll cut up to that analogy later on. Fisher has a slipstream, trying to make the move into turn 17, not even a chance. That's how quick that corner is. We'll have another opportunity though on the exit as Scotland goes a little bit wide. Fisher has a slipstream down into turn 1, one of the easier overtaking opportunities, but Fisher doesn't seem like he's got the top end speed at this point in time to get past Scotland. Now Fisher, less than 0.3 of a second between the two Toyotas, heading through this tighter complex of 3, 4 and 5. We'll have another straight into turn 7 to possibly make a little lunge down the inside or possibly even the outside, depending on which way Scotland goes to defend. But I think he's too far back. He lost a fair bit of time through 3, 4 and 5. He's gaining that back again through slipstreaming, but I just don't think it's enough. He must have got a bit of dirty air from the back of Scotland, losing a bit more downforce, meaning the minimum speed has to be a little bit lower, causing him to be a little bit slower overall. So that attack has been put to one side for the time being, but as soon as Scotland makes a little lock up, a little bit going wide, understeer or oversteer slightly, I can say Fisher will be all over the back of Scotland once again, possibly even overtaking them.
Getting really racy behind that of Scotland now. Obviously still in that same machinery as we do end up saying, but he's definitely finding some kind of advantage in the dying stages of here on stint number 1, roughly 30 minutes is the time per stint. 2 times wear and 2 times time, you do see that the wear leads to about 30-minute stints, like the hour-long stints in real life. But on the medium tires, equal sets of tires, no one setting a left front hard like we did see at Bahrain. But Fisher is really struggling to make this work. But interesting to see that the energy levels across all of the drivers has equaled out rather significantly. Xander Coffin has caught up to everyone else in energy usage as we see Fisher diving into the gravel, extending the circuit just a little bit, maybe getting a little bit on the ants and in terms of how much they are pushing this car, clearly trying to extract a little bit more performance to get back at Scotland and potentially beat them out again. But right now, Scotland doing an excellent job in defense and keeping well composed.
Yeah, keeping composed, calm, and collected. The 3 C's in this championship. That's actually going to be my slogan now. But Fisher, yeah, just dropping back a little bit now, struggling seemingly. Yeah, he is using a fair bit more energy as well, about 2% down. Again, in the grand scheme of things, that doesn't sound like a lot, but it can be in the future. It'll be interesting to see if that could possibly cost him a lap in the pit lane as well. Fisher, I imagine, will be an earlier stopper than Scotland, but Scotland may not feel that extra 2% will give him an extra lap. So that'll be all up in the air in the next few laps when we will see the hypercars coming into pit lane. A little bit wide there from Scotland, and Fisher has closed up a lot once again, heading down into turn 17, got the slipstream. It's a really quick corner though, turn 17, not really a braking zone until you turn in, and Fisher lifting off a little bit early, does not want to hit the back end of Scotland this early on, giving Scotland a little bit more breathing space. Also, there'll be more air flowing over that car, producing more downforce for Fisher, as Fisher now has slipstream, but still a little bit more further back, incredibly late on the brakes into turn 1. Really close now to the back of Scotland. Scotland will be looking in his mirrors constantly, seeing where Fisher may dive for a little hook and try and get in front of the lead Toyota for now.
Yeah, Fisher understanding that this race isn't necessarily won in one corner, choosing to leave it out a little bit. And this last lap, we've seen that James has been able to save a little bit more energy as they are further around the circuit, so they won't have to have as much energy to make it across the same amount of distance. So even though they may have been at the same amount of energy, it's relative to track position. He is a slightly farther ahead, so that always means he's even more relatively saved. But we will see the drivers coming into pit lane either this or next lap, as they are now in that final 10% of battery. We're going wide again. We do see Fisher just really pushing on that track limits. As just a little bit of analysis is, Xander has slightly caught this battle, but he is still 20 seconds adrift and really regretting that spin earlier on, as he could really be getting into the mix, either with James or this battle of Toyotas.
Yeah, obviously early mistake from Coffin, making an error through the 3, 4, 5 and into 6 complex, going off into track grass. Luckily around this track as well, but normally if you go off track you'll be hitting a wall, but luckily for his sake he did not hit a wall, but obviously cost him a huge amount of time, and to rub salt in the wound, he ended up behind the whole entire GT class as well, so that was really unfortunate for him. What I've noticed though in this lead battle, or this second place battle of the Toyotas, that Fisher is very quick in that final section through 10 to really 13, and then 15 and 16. They're incredibly quick around that section, but as soon as he catches up through into 17, there isn't necessarily an overtaking opportunity, and then into turn 1, seems like he loses all that ground again. But this time around, Fisher seems to be hot on Scotland's tail for 1, possibly 2 more laps before they come into the pit lane. This may be crucial for Fisher to make the move before coming into the pit lane, or he may decide to hand back sit back a little bit and save a little bit more energy, a little bit more tyres, instead of wasting time trying to make the move on track where he could end up making the move in the pit lane later on. As Coffin is the first hypercar to come into the pit lane, as well as the lead for the GT gates as well. I think that's the entire GT field now, at least in the pit lane, or has been in the pit lane. And here comes Fisher trying to do that alternate strategy as he comes into the pit lane, and a huge swapper as well for Scotland for good measure. Clearly those tyres, well, they probably can last another stint maybe, but clearly those tyres are definitely overheating, and Fisher pushing as much, Scotland pushing as much as possible.
James out behind Zander, who's come through the pit lane, potentially will run into Zander as a little bit of lap traffic at this point on those warmer compound tyres. But Fisher going for that undercut strategy on Scotland, though ineffective out at Bahrain. In overall, the overcut ended up paying way more value back at the end of the race, where that shorter last pit stop just to make the distance to the end of the race ended up affording them way more time than taking this the earlier pit stop to try and undercut. So it's going to be interesting to see if it happens that way again and ends up in Scotland's favour for the longer duration of this race. But we finally get to see James out in front in that Ferrari, a glorious looking car with that huge rear wing on the back end, looking very comfortable in this machinery. 8.2 seconds, but growing a little bit to Scotland across this last lap, as Scotland potentially needs to save a little bit of energy as well, as they had only 5% coming onto this lap and may have miscalculated it just a little bit.
Yeah, back in the GT battle, we see Gates having a huge lead now after the pit stop strategy, as we do have the leader of the hypercars and overall class coming into the pit lane. 28 seconds now in front of the rest of the GT field. But McDavitti, that is the spinner earlier on in the Corvette, and he has, gained about a second into the pit stop phase, so that is huge work for him to try and catch up to the back of that McLaren that he was battling for so long earlier on.
Yeah, McDavitti struggling to catch back up to this McLaren, but he did end up spinning and losing huge amount of times from. Currently 6 GT3 cars left within this race, and 4 hypercars left, as we see the McLaren of finally coming into the pit lanes. This should be one of the last pit stops, if not the last pit stop coming through, but I thought I saw Binder already coming into the pit lane.
Yeah, that was interesting. That'll be interesting to see if we can see who has pitted and how many times. I think this is the second stop.
That would mean that they had picked up a drive-through penalty, which was going to give McDavitt that position for 3 over Binder in this McLaren, caught speeding into the pit lane, picking up that drive-through penalty, having to come through the pit lane again and service that penalty. Won't just lose out time, the position to McDavitt, but will lose a significant amount of time as well. 12 seconds behind that car now. Will try and chase them back down, but really putting themselves at a disadvantage, but also putting themselves within arm's reach of Freddie Woolley, who hasn't been quite on the same page as Binder in this race, but will have slightly warmer tyres, as the car in front would have had colder tyres after going so slowly through that pit lane.
Yeah, the pit stop phase is now relatively over. Well, at least this first pit stop phase is relatively over. But fuel strategy, now this is something interesting. I don't think everyone has filled up their tanks to the brim, because we've seen quite a few gaps getting larger and quite a few gaps getting smaller by significant amounts. And I'm not just saying a couple tenths of a second, I'm saying multiple seconds. And I believe somebody has been telling us some information, and it was binder and gate was up to 10 seconds faster through the pit lane. That could be a little strategy. Whoa, that was close. That could be a little interesting strategy that could pay out later on. If the tyres do die off in the fuel strategy, then they will be having an empty tank with less worse tyres, which means a lighter car, which means the tyres will last a little bit longer. When I say a little bit, I'm talking about a couple laps longer, which means they can come into the pit lane, change their tyres and fill up their car at the same time. Whilst the other cars may have to come into the pit lane sooner than they would like because their cars are heavier and carrying more fuel because of their tyres falling off the edge. So that's something to look forward to later on into the second phase pit stops, to see who is focusing on their tyre strategies and who is focusing on their fuel strategies, and which strategy will be better off. And that is something we will not know until the checkered flag is out. But it's so important to try and carve through these lap traffic as quickly and efficiently as possible.
It's interesting to see that the undercut and the overcut have simultaneously worked out in favour of different drivers in the hypercar category. Xander Coffin's overall gap has significantly reduced after undercutting the rest of the field. However, Scotland leads in front of James. Now, James has rapidly, 1.4 seconds in that previous lap, caught up to the back of Scotland. He is absolutely flying at the moment, and Fisher behind him is flying even faster, 5 seconds currently behind James, and that time has decreased as well. Scotland seems to be going rather slowly at this current stage of the pit stop cycle, but they did save a huge significant amount of time in their pit stops and they came out in the lead of this race. But right now they seem to be struggling on their colder tyre compound, which is allowing James to catch them back up, but they dive into the pit lane, potentially having a drive-through penalty to serve or some kind of upper issue, but they had to come into the pit lane as they were rapidly faster than that of Scotland in front of them. But their race, just like it did in Bahrain, will end up being self-sabotaged by having to drive through the pit lane once again due to a penalty that they have picked up, and they will slip behind Xander, who will rise onto the podium positions, and we see that the gap between Scotland and Fisher is now 7.6 seconds, built off of extending the stint for Scotland and taking a shorter pit lane stop.
Yeah, this feels a bit like early hypercars now, with the two Toyotas leading the way of Scotland and Fisher. Scotland, yeah, he must be fueling less than Fisher and the others, so it'll be interesting to see how quickly Fisher can catch up and how much Scotland is saving. And obviously Scotland wouldn't have known that James in the Ferrari would have that drive-through penalty. So that is something to consider, that Scotland will prioritise track position than strategy, which could be a hindrance later on if there's an awkward moment in the pit stop phase earlier. But Scotland actually has a lot more energy than Fisher.
Yeah, Scotland having that extra energy by pitting later into this race will be able to save it up quite significantly, while Fisher and Coffin, you can see it already, down 6%, but we did see huge variations across the stint previously as well. But the one key thing to mention about energy is that you do typically burn a lot more in the early stages of a stint than you do in the later stages, as you don't want to be having too much energy on displays. It does impact that braking performance if you have a full set of energy every single lap, though that virtual energy tank will tick down over time as well.
Yeah, you're quite right there, as well as the weight of the car. If the car's heavier with a full tank of fuel and energy, that will be sloshing about, disturbing the balance of the car, as well as making the car slide a hell of a lot more, costing in tyre performance. So lighter the car, normally faster it is, and you can see how close they are getting to the exit of 17. against that wall. There is no margin for error, and that's why we saw incidents there in the 10-minute qualifying session. We just finished, or actually just finished, that's gone very quickly. We finished a while ago now. So a quick recap of the cars in this race and out. We had an unfortunate early retirement, both 2 in the GT class and 1 in the hypercar class of Green in that Lamborghini, which is a real shame for him. It'll be interesting to see how the others stack up as well. As you can see, the other of Chong and Gora in that BMW retiring extremely early into this race. But as we can see, Callum Scotland leading the way, 18 laps down, and I've got to say about 18 laps to go or so for that Toyota leading the way. That Cadillac though, oh, what's an unfortunate start for Coffin, starting on the front row, making a mistake through that first complex of corners, costing him a huge amount of time. Currently P3, as James in that Ferrari is unfortunate with a couple drive-through penalties. James is rapidly catching up though in the last couple corners. Well, I say that now as the gap gets a little bit bigger, but Coffin now also catching up to Fisher, because at the start of the pit stop phase that gap was about 20 seconds. Now it is cut down to 18 and touching into the 17-second zone. So Coffin is slowly catching up. He might need a little bit of a miracle to further increase his positions up the podium into the likes of Fisher and Scotland. Be interesting to see what James in that Ferrari can do later on, if he can pick up another place on that podium to expense of Coffin. So anything can happen with 38 minutes left of this race.
Yeah, the favourite part of the race for endurance fan enthusiasts, but potentially the worst part for the fans who are used to the action out in Formula 1. With much shorter races and no refueling in Formula 1, you're used to the constant action out on track, but here in endurance racing, this is the part that you will really, really love. The culmination of strategies. Yes, the drivers are further out on track, but when you get those battles, they're treasurable. They're much more treasurable because it means that a storyline that has developed across hours and different strategies have come together for both potentially being their fastest strategy for the car that they are driving, however still ending up with them both on track fighting for position, especially once you get around to the big Le Mans. Though with Le Mans you do have that 24 hours and the pure beauty of driving at night and in the early morning. But we will be going to some highlights and the race start for you guys here shortly. As we go back to lap number 1, the reason why Xander is a little bit far behind the circuit was his desperate attempt to keep it around the outside here on the Ferrari, which then lost him a lot of time as he has a mild lockup and then has to fight against the Toyota, which sees him going wide again on those cold tyres and into the grass, where he ends up spinning it and having to wait for the entire GT field to pass him on by. Then we saw that the two Toyotas had a little bit of a bout, with Fisher and Scotland finding different levels of pace across the stint, but still relatively behind each other. But the biggest moment of all so far in this race is that spin by that Corvette of McDavitti, who was directly racing against Binder, but lost so much time due to that spin while they were amidst in battle. And then the next major segment that ended up happening was James, who was catching Scotland at an absolute rate of knots, having to dive back into that pit lane once again, due to the fact that he had sped into the pit lane for the second race in a row. Last time out in Bahrain, leading in the second stint, but squandering his chances, and here again, leading the way. But as we get back with the live action, James has caught a little bit of the gap to Coffin, but Fisher has made an inroads on Scotland, gaining 9.5 attempts, now down to 3.7 seconds the difference.
Yeah, that is huge for Fisher's race later on to try and catch back up to Scotland. Yeah, Scotland was able to go quite a bit longer in that first stint, has a fair bit more energy now. Fisher, slightly less energy, but it's 3.3 second gap now. It was 5 seconds just moments ago. Possibly Scotland making a mistake, possibly Fisher just finding a part of the track that somehow has a huge amount more grip, which Scotland hasn't found yet. Or maybe it may have been lapped traffic for Scotland, as we do see some lap cars in the way now, as Fisher gains another 4 or 5 tenths of a second as Chong in that Mercedes. Oh, I was about to say getting out of the way, but not really, as he may be holding up. Oh, that's massive for the championship and this race. Fisher massively being held up there by Chong in that Mercedes, 2 different classes. And it's like we've said before, when you are lapping other cars in other categories, it is so vital to get through. And from a 2.8 second gap, it is back down to a 3.5, possibly even to a 3.6 second gap. That's a huge time difference that Fisher will have to try and claim back just through driver skill and raw talent. Scotland now just 3.2 seconds into the lead, 3 seconds now. Scotland maybe losing a little bit of grip, a little bit more tire performance, because he does have a more fuller fuel tank and a virtual energy tank, so that will be interesting later on to see. Fisher now less than 3 seconds.
Yeah, we do see that the GT category for 2 races in a row is very spread apart. Wally down in P number 8, a little bit of an improvement from the start of his qualifying, as we do see him out on track. In that Legion Porsche, one of 3 cars representing London Legion, coming from London, obviously, as the title suggests, but clearly potentially some games that could come out from the fact that these drivers come from the same team, as obviously having cars in the GT field, you're not going to be able to play huge games against the rest of the traffic, but you're definitely going to favour letting through your fellow driver as much as possible. It might be a case of you don't try to hold up the other drivers, but you just get out of the way just that little bit more of your fellow driver in the hypercar.
Yeah, I think Scotland also caught up to that Porsche through turn 1, which was a quick corner for both cars. So that may have held Callum Scotland up a little bit more. And of course, Lucas Fisher being let past, very thankful indeed. Now just shy or just over 2 second gap. This is closer than we have seen since the pit stop phase. This battle is brewing, and this will be the battle for the lead. A very important battle between the two Toyotas.
Yeah, this gap has come down quite a lot. It's going to be continuing to build, it does seem, but that twitch from Lucas Fisher caught very, very rapidly. But that does mean he loses a little bit of time through that segment of corners, dropping 6 tenths by the time we get round to this straightaway. Finally stabilise that disadvantage, as we do see that he's coming behind this McLaren. It's going to be important to dispatch of him very, very quickly in the same fashion that Callum was able to get by, which they do, which will leave them cleanly back into free air until they run into that Corvette up ahead in Mukdavit, who then they will have 50 seconds of GT pace between them to actually chase down each other. And so far, every chance Lucas Fisher gets, he is so much quicker in the free air.
Yeah, well, I think Fisher's little twitch earlier on may have actually helped him in a way, because that McLaren was caught up at the exit of turn 17. If that twitch didn't happen, and he lost a fair bit of time through that back end not being very stable, he would have caught up to the McLaren mid-corner of turn 17, which would have been incredibly slow for a hypercar through that section compared to a GT car. So that twitch may have looked bad to start off with, but may have helped him in the long run, as he is closing up to Scotland now. The virtual energy is showing that Fisher has 26%, Scotland has 33%. So I think actually Scotland has lost a couple more percent to Fisher over that last half stint since we last saw the energy readings. So that's something to look forward to later on in the pit stop phase. But I imagine Fisher will definitely be the car that pits first out of the top two Toyotas.
Yeah, the main thing as we go through this race is that actually Scotland's been held up quite significantly by McDavid in that last little bit, and it will seem that Fisher will get past the Corvette in very quick time, which will see that gap drop below that 2-second threshold for the first time in a quite significant amount of time, and neither driver will be held up by this Mercedes in terms of traffic as we head towards turn number 1, as Fisher should be able to get alongside on the inside and cleanly by down to 1.1 seconds of lap time in the last lap, which is a huge improvement based on partially the ability to get through that traffic, as we are now going into another piece of lap traffic as well in front of this battle, but they will have to get past as well. But hopefully after this car, they will get a bit of clean air to finally tackle each other again. But as you mentioned, that energy level for Scotland will come out in abundance in the second pit stop, as in that first one, you have to feel for 100% to be able to make it towards the end. But in the second one, you're not just saving the energy level in the pit lane in the pit lane straight up, but you don't have to fuel to 100% capacity due to the fact that you're going to the end of the race, which won't need 100% capacity. So you can save massive amounts of time. So it is vitally important. But yes, Fisher is quicker than Scotland, but it's also able to save some extra energy along the way as well.
But also, this gives all the cards to Scotland in a way, because if Scotland pits on the same lap as Fisher, Scotland's pit stop is going to be so much quicker, like you said. So he's going to gain so much time either way. If he pits before Fisher, he pits at the same time as Fisher, or after Fisher, he is going to gain a fair bit amount of time, either because he doesn't have to pit as long, or because he saved a little bit more energy and he can use it up a little bit more. He doesn't have to be conservative in the mid part. But at Ferrari, 30% energy, that's the most out of anyone. Yes, in 4th place, but they may be able to catch up to at least Coffin in that Cadillac.
Yeah, Coffin's really, really struggling in terms of energy saving in this race, which kind of halted him a little bit in that last one. But never say never in terms of races like these. We're 27 minutes away from the end of this race at the moment. But in the last lap, we saw 2 separate drivers in the hypercar category spin out of the race, which gave Xander Coffin a P2 finishing position, which he was nowhere near the sights of prior to those spins. So never say never, and never say never to Scotland as well, who is only 7 tenths behind Lucas Fisher now, who is really, really starting to struggle for pace. But we did see in that earlier stint how hard it can be to try and get past when you're behind the car in front.
Yeah, Fisher will be getting all that dirty air from the back of Scotland's Toyota, losing downforce, letting the car slide a fair bit, or using a little bit more energy as well. But we'll have the benefit of slipstreaming when he has the straight lines, which we do have coming up right about here. We do have a brief yellow flag out, but I think that's been all cleared up relatively quickly. But Scotland, right on the tail of Fisher. We haven't seen it this close since before the pit stop stages. But remember, Fisher will have to pit earlier, which will possibly give Scotland the advantage. Scotland I don't think he knows about the energy saving, but he will know how much energy he has compared to Fisher. And Fisher, if he pits earlier, Scotland will know that he has that advantage. So may not even fight this battle too hard, as it's getting incredibly close, within 4 tenths of a second now, and it is pretty close. But in the GT field, we got our first pitters, McDavid, getting his Corvette into the pit lane, which will be a net P3 after Binder also comes into the pit lane in his McLaren. He's going to have a slightly longer stop because he had a shorter stop last time out in the pit phases. So that Corvette be interesting to see later on if he could get in front of Binder or not, especially after that spin he had. But the battle up the top end of the field between the two Toyotas are getting spicy and getting closer. 0.4 of a second now separate the two, and this is actually a latter part of the track as well, which is where Fisher usually struggles. So it's really vital for Fisher to be relatively close to Scotland.
Yeah, it's crucial that Fisher tries to get use out of the slipstream. He may be able to claw back just a little bit of percentage with just how much faster he has been compared to Scotland in this middle stint. He may be able to just lift off the throttle and save that energy percentage, which I think we are seeing him do. He's clearly turning down the energy pack levels just a little bit, as he is not catching that car in a straight line, even with that slipstream advantage, which potentially will bring him a little bit back into this race. But we do see Xander Coffin coming into the pit lane, the first of the hypercars, and his teammate in the GT category, and Wally, coming in simultaneously as well. Hopefully for the both of them, they don't lose up too much time in the pit lanes, but James has a huge 21% battery advantage over everyone else. That won't be enough to make it to the end, but he will have a clear advantage over everyone else and potentially a full lap advantage over Scotland as well. That means he will be able to save a huge chunk of time in that pit lane, but he is still 20 seconds adrift of this lead battle.
Yeah, 20 seconds. That drive-through penalty has cost him the race win today. But again, never say never in endurance racing. Anything can change, especially when the two leading Toyotas are battling it out and trying to find their ways through the lapped traffic, as that is the GT leader Gates in that menacing-looking Lamborghini Huracan, getting out of the way of the two Toyotas, letting them pass. But I think that cost them a little bit of time for Scotland, and so the gap has closed up by 1.5 seconds. But Binder is in the pit lane as well. So Binder. Will Binder get in front of McDevitt? Will McDevitt stay in front of Binder at the end? I think Binder will stay in front simply because McDevitt had to have a longer pit stop and has had a spin in this race. But the undercut might be vital for the Corvette.
Xander Coffin has picked up a speeding in pit lane drive-through penalty. His race will go from a little bit rough for himself, especially after that qualifying pace, to much, much worse. He ends up picking up a drive-through penalty from speeding in the pit lane, and will have to drive through yet again, losing himself even more time, and without anyone else picking up a drive-through of their own, losing out and losing position to James on circuit, putting him down far, far behind in 4th place, unfortunately, in this race. But this race between Scotland and Fisher may not be for much longer anymore, as Fisher will be coming very, very low on battery percent on this lap, potentially to the point that he will be forced into the pit lane. But it will be interesting to see if Scotland chooses to pit on the same lap or go one lap further.
That is very interesting to see, and also Coffin has put a whopping 79% into his car, into the virtual energy of that fuel tank, which I don't think you need that much for 20 minutes left of the race. I might be wrong. There is a reason I'm talking about the race rather than in the race. But yeah, it's interesting. But Coffin has gone through into the pit lane to serve that penalty, which will cost him a huge amount of time, possibly that podium to James in the pit lane. But here comes Fisher for his final stop of the race. The Toyota chasing down the other Toyota at the moment. Scotland now has a little bit of clean air behind him and in front of him, so he won't have much pressure for a little bit now. This could be vital, and slightly deep in the pit box, that's going to cost him a fair bit of time as well, as James makes his way up back into 2nd place. But remember, he will most likely have another pit stop, because off the top of my head, it will be about 10% now on the virtual energy, which is not enough for that 20-minute session. But it's so important to get the right amount of fuel into your car for the rest of this race, because Coffin has definitely overfueled his car. He's basically spent way too much time in the pit lane waiting about, fiddling with his thumbs, when he could be out there driving that Cadillac to, was going to be a podium, but with that pit lane penalty, that could have given James another podium in his Ferrari. But again, if there are battling cars in front of you, anything and everything can happen.
Although Binder came into the pit lane a lap later than McDevitt, still not able to catch up the necessary time by taking a slightly shorter pit stop on fuel to catch up to McDevitt in that Corvette. Still 12 seconds adrift from that P2, but will still happily be in that P number 3 position. Though Alexa Gates is clearly gone 56 seconds down the road, second race in a row, dominating that GT category. But it's these hypercars that have been the focus today, with the gaps and the lap times seeming extortionarily big at the moment. And McEwen is able to get in front of Freddie Wally and get into P number 8 for now. But Scotland does come into the pits, but I don't expect to see James coming into the pits this lap around, as 18 minutes left of the session will mean that Callum Scotland won't have to fuel almost anywhere near to the same extent that Zander had to fuel his car to make it to the end of this race.
Yeah, Scotland will be in and out of that pit box as quickly as he can. It staggers me, honestly, how bumpy Turn 17 is, and how these cars stay in relatively a straight line most of the time. It generally is such an old piece of tarmac from 1950s, and it's so bumpy around certain parts of this track as they go off into the, I guess, midsection of this track through into the technical part of Sector 1 and into Sector 2. Yeah, it's a staggering track how they built this track. One of the earliest road courses in America. Scotland, though, still in the pit lane. We are watching Fisher now. Fisher has overtaken Scotland in the pit lane. This is confusing. What? This is not what I thought would happen. Fisher has now got in front of Scotland, but has a huge amount of traffic as he'll have to navigate to cars.
Yeah, Scotland spending a huge amount of time in the pit lane, an extreme amount for how much he actually needed to fuel the car, potentially having some kind of alternate issue, or potentially changing the tyres. Well, potentially Lucas Fisher didn't change tyres instead, because as that does add a separate section of lap time to your pit stops in the end, and it's potentially why Scotland was so much faster than Fisher in that first set of pit stops. But James will have a huge extra benefit of time in the pit stops in comparison. He will have nowhere near as much dead time stopped, as he has saved another further lap compared to Scotland. But we do see that this McLaren is had a little bit of a struggle with that lap traffic, and we will see that Scotland will now have to deal with this lap traffic as well, and will get held up just slightly by this McLaren in their chase towards Lucas Fisher in the dying stages of this race, but will want desperately just to see a bit of clear air to lock in and put their head down to try and put in some rapid pace.
16 minutes left of the race. The gap between the leaders now just shy of 10 seconds of the net leaders, as James in that Ferrari is in the pit lane and will be coming out behind the two leaders, and most likely behind Coffin as well. But between the two, actually, James will be on the cold tyres, but it's relatively hot around here, about 37 degrees C, and has come out in front of Scotland. So Scotland, from leading the race, that extra long pit stop has cost him the lead of the race down to third place. Now battling for second place with James, who has, started the race really strong form. He thought was the favourite to win after two pit lane speeding penalties. He has dropped behind, well, for now, one Toyota and was both Toyotas. But there is a huge amount of lap traffic trying to navigate through. The Ferrari getting past then relatively cleanly, but the Toyota of Scotland crucially getting in, and there's a spin further back in the GT class. I think that was McDevitt getting spun round by someone. I'm not entirely sure who, but I definitely did see a GT car sideways through turn 6. It'll be interesting to see who that was. I do think it was McDevitt in second place, and Binder has closed a huge amount of time. This is what happened in the GT class. Getting past was the hypercar relatively cleanly, and that was all clean, and the Toyota behind will also get past clean. This is a little tap of the McLaren there, and more tapping. So the McLaren got held up massively, possibly watching the hypercars, not the, and a little tap
McLaren
in the background.
Sends him around. He is able to stabilize himself and recenter and get back out on track in front of Binder, but that race for second from 2 spins from McDevitt and on the hands of Binder, a drive-through penalty, all has evened out, unfortunately for both of them. 75 seconds away from P1, but they find themselves back on the same piece of tarmac, fighting for P number 2. However, is there damage to Adam McDevitt's car that will hamper his ability to keep John Binder behind for the rest of this race, who is looking extremely racy right now and only 3/10 behind? This will be the first true corner that we see them going through, and clearly that McLaren has so much more grip going into the corner. He has gained absolute car length just in that braking zone alone, tucking into that slipstream now, making Adam McDevitt dive out of the way, but pulling alongside and making his statement on the inside. John Binder will find his way back into P number 2 after devastation strikes Adam McDevitt, picking up damage and being spun by lap traffic, putting a stop to his second place drive and giving it over to John Binder, who will hope to pull away in a much cleaner McLaren left in this race.
That spin from McDevitt, which was not his fault, has cost him a huge amount of time, and that battle that we've been seeing throughout the whole time. This is a replay of how that McLaren of Binder got past that Corvette into the slipstream, making a move, putting his nose into turn 1, moving quite far actually up the inside, slight bit of contact, but I think it was simply McDevitt must have seen him coming, but didn't realise how much wider that McLaren needed to be. But fair is square, is that a phrase? I'll go with it. Binder has got in front of the Corvette and has already got a 1.5 second gap. That was an immense battle for second place from the very start of this race, of McDevitt making that mistake, spinning around his Corvette, letting Binder pass in that McLaren. Now once again McDevitt making contact with another car that caused damage to his car, and Binder finally getting past that Corvette, which is, I imagine, a sight for sore eyes for him. 77 seconds split between 5th and 6th on the road, but the leaders of the GT class. That is a massive gap that Gates has done once again in that Lamborghini Huracan. He did that last time out in Bahrain. It's a very different track here around Sebring. It is very clear that he is immense in that car.
Looking towards Scotland and James, it does seem that James in that Ferrari is finding that qualifying pace yet again, and it's able to keep Scotland at bay just over a second at the moment consistently on those tyres. It did look a little bit wary for a bit while Callum had those newer, fresher tyres on hand. However, now into these last few laps with that Ferrari's tyres warmed up, James has been a little bit quicker, but this lap in particular, Callum has afforded themselves a little bit more time. The gap last lap was over 1.4 seconds by the end. But right now, unless James finds huge amount of time for this final corner, Callum will be able to catch back up slightly on this lap to James, which he seems to have done so again through this final corner. Sadly for both of these drivers, Lucas Fisher is finding themselves at 9 seconds down the road in P number 1 and able to perform the exact same strategy they found themselves pulling in Bahrain, getting a shorter pit stop and finding huge track advantages, being in the pit stops for less total time, putting them out in front. But James has got to be careful going that wide on the circuit. He doesn't want to have to do any more slowdown penalties to avoid getting an actual severe penalty to their name. But it clearly does allow Scotland to catch back up, having to lift off of that corner after going so significantly right. And we are finally into the final stages of this race as the sun is setting in the background. We may not make it completely into darkness, but that sun will be glazing into these drivers' eyes and making it significantly harder at certain sections of the circuit to drive these laps cleanly. But Callum Scotland has his target directly in front of him, has a gauge of how to replicate the pace of James, but can they do it in the dying stages?
That is the question. We're just shy of 10 minutes left of this race. Riding the curb very aggressively, costing him a little bit of time. You can see that ride curving there.
Lucas Fisher seems to have actually potentially had a slight connection issue to the rest of the lobby, as no cars are on track in front of them, and they have dropped massively, all the way to only 1 second of advantage to James, as they have randomly dropped 6 seconds of time. James now has a target in front of himself to chase on down in Lucas Fisher, who had a huge gap advantage that he would have felt safe on, but clearly he has lost some time somewhere on the circuit and is now only 1.2 seconds remaining with 8 minutes remaining in this lap. That is roughly 4 laps left in this race at their current lapping pace. It will be interesting to see if any of these drivers gonna find the consistency to challenge one another, but right now James is rapidly catching into Fisher.
Yeah, just 1.5 seconds or so separating the top 3 in this race. 70 odd minutes into this race as well. This is incredibly close between the 3 drivers. Toyota, Ferrari, Toyota. It is a Toyota sandwich for now, but don't get me wrong, these are not teammates. These drivers are out there to get the best result for themselves. There will not be any I'll let you by. No, I'll let you by. No, the elbows will be out in for Scotland now. It's 0.5 of a second behind James. James just 1 second behind Fisher in that Toyota, less than that now. So this is going to be vital. Lap traffic getting in the way of that lead GT car, and Fisher getting through. Will this hinder James though into turn 17? No, James gets through, so does Scotland. That is vital for the rest of the battle, as I believe they will not be getting any more lap traffic for at least this lap.
6 minutes remaining of this race. The storylines are accumulating in this final stint. James was your pole sitter here today. He was clearly out in front in qualifying and clear of these 2 Toyotas who drove a different strategy to him in this race. He was good on fuel. He went the longest out of the first 2 stints by the most laps. Scotland found himself in the middle. He's at the back of this pack. But the driver who had the shortest stints of the 3 was Fisher, who finds himself leading away, now defending his position after finding himself with the shortest pit stop out of all of these races. Clearly, the lights are fading in the sky. The track is getting darker, which will make the car's lights seem that ever so much brighter. You see them flashing, you see the distractions. They're trying to play the games on each other now. With 5 minutes 30 seconds remaining, they're gonna send everything at the wall and hopefully make it stick. But none of these drivers want the devastation that the drivers last time who was winning the race, felt as James would desperately low in that race in Bahrain.
1.2 seconds now separate the top 3 drivers. This is nail-biting stuff. This is almost impossible to have this many cars so close together at these dying stages of the race. 5 minutes to go, less than a second now separating. James has caught a massive amount of time up to Fisher in that Toyota, the lead car in that camo livery with the pinky shark fin. As he's going to make a move, he's going to make a move down the inside of turn 17. Fisher hanging out wide, going to get the better minimum speed. James in that Ferrari, almost side drafting down into turn 1 on the outside earlier on the brake, so may actually make a switcheroo, but Fisher is smart enough for that. Look where Scotland is going to make a move, but round the outside, James is going to attempt it. We've seen it before. We've seen a call Cadillac into the grass. It's going to be nail-biting stuff. Elbows to elbows, wheels to wheels as they swoop round turn 6. Right. The Ferrari is going to be on the inside. We're going to have 3 wide heading into turn 7 now. One of the hardest brakies. The Ferrari just has a slight advantage, locking up as well.
Yeah, the Ferrari making contact, forcing himself down the inside of that final corner and squeezes his way argy-bargy along the entire first sector of the circuit as Fisher goes spinning into the barrier on the second to final lap, trying to outbrake that of Scotland and find himself keeping that defensive move on the inside. He was clearly pushed to his limits by James, and the pressure from Scotland makes him crack after just a little bit more time, as Scotland also finds themselves dipping their tires into the curb and losing 1.5 seconds to James in front. As the yellow flag comes out, Fisher potentially with damage to their car, losing the rear wing like we saw in Bahrain to 2 separate drivers. A car has spun into the barrier and lost their rear wing. Xander's Coffin's efforts may still end up in himself finding himself onto the podium for a second race in a row just by surviving until the end, as both drivers leading the way run themselves wide to the entire edge of the circuit. But right now, James in the Ferrari has found himself cleanly into the lead and now leads the way once again, like he did in qualifying, by 2 seconds over that of Scotland in second.
Fisher, with that damage, has come into the pit lane to repair that rear wing, which could give Coffin the advantage to get into that 3rd position. But 73 minutes into this race, and a little mistake like that, I think he locked the rears up into one of the heavier braking zones, making that mistake, hitting the barrier and needing to repair, and that is Coffin into a podium position. Huge effort for him, and to finish in the top 3 first, you have to finish. Let's see what's happened.
As we go into replay, we don't necessarily straight away get the replay of the exact thing that happens, but we do see the little bit of time loss from this replay that Callum Scotland found to James at the start of the replay, just going a little bit wide, dumping his tyres off onto the corner. But the main section of replay that we want to see is the lack of rear wing on Lucas Fisher's car. The spin that he ended up having comes from this 3 wide section here. As he goes down the inside, in the middle he gets squeezed. So he's forced into the Ferrari, which means he loses out a bunch of time, which gives Scotland a nice little exit, but he is able to barge him out of the way. But on the defensive line that he tries to take, he ends up outbraking himself just a little bit. And luckily for James, who has to take an avoidance action, doesn't get collected in the meantime, as in the live feed as well, we see James spinning around in that final corner and clearly having unrepairable damage on that Toyota. It's not just damage to that rear wing, but potentially damage to the floorboards as well, but he won't be able to fix in the rest of this pit lane. But we are now going on to the final lap of the race with 36 seconds left on the dying clock. You can see that he is spinning again. That Toyota is damaged. He is now in the stage of the race where he needs to just make it towards the end. James instead is perfectly fine within that Ferrari. 20 seconds is all he has left. This final lap will see him charging towards the checkered flag as he tackles now the final few corners. He potentially will have one Mercedes left as some lap traffic to pass for one final time as the darkness sets over the nights in Florida, over the bumpy Sebring circuit, but has claimed many a driver here today. We've seen multiple drive-throughs, multiple drivers end up DNFing from this race, but on top, it's the quickest driver in qualifying. It's the driver who kept it clean. James Dazuba coming through now on the final section of the circuit to reign on top like he nearly so did in Bahrain, but this time not finding himself picking up a drive-through and cleanly coming out on top. He had issues early in the race, but his consistency and pace will pay off properly this time. He will flash the lights and come across the line in P1, followed closely behind by Scotland in P2, the fastest in qualifying in Bahrain, who ran into major issues across the rest of that race. But again, two-time race winner coming through in the GT3 category with only a few corners left in the blue and black Lamborghini. It's Alexa again in this Lamborghini, flying that 35, dominating out in front and easily winning this race. But with the lap to traffic in front coming in the pit lane already, it's Binder in P2 and McDavitti in P3 to round out the podium. But your GT3 winner is Alexa Gates for the second time this season and putting a dominant standing on the constructors list. Xander Coffin is your P3 overall with Luca Fischer in 4th. And what a race we've had here at Sebring.
What an absolute mental race that was, especially at the end, that three wide moment. Well, we rarely get that in motorsport, let alone after a 75-minute race. That was incredible.
Absolutely incredible scenes here from the BUSR for LMU. Brought to you by Grid Finder in partnership with the NSC for university level esports competition in sim racing. This isn't the only competition where you get action like this here at BUSR, as we do have AC tournaments on the Mondays. Saturdays are Formula One, but brand new to the BUSR in partnership, we will have an iRacing series in collaboration with Motorsports UK and Nottingham Trent University to supply an iRacing series coming out as well.
And in just a moment's time, we're going to try and grab as many drivers as possible, at least in the top 3, to come here and have a quick chat and summarize their race, because what a race it was. We had ups and downs, we had penalties, we had spins, we had crashes, we had incidents. What an incredible event we just had. And I can see in the waiting room, we definitely have some drivers that we can drag in.
Yeah, we're just going to wait a little bit on the interviewers, but it's going to be interesting to hear from... It's going to be interesting to hear from the P3 in the race. For the second time overall, welcome on in this time around, Xander. How was that race for you overall?
Yeah, overall it just came down to a fault on my own, speeding into the pit lane there, getting a stop-go penalty. That just ended my kind of like push back from the spin at the start. So getting a bit awkward off that start line into that, I think it's like the 4th or 5th corner, ended up on the grass, put me down at the back, but obviously managed to work my way back up, and obviously with whatever happened to P4, I ended up getting the podium, so I'm happy with that to keep the podium streak alive with a P2 last weekend and a P3 this weekend. So it's not the be-all and end-all, and we're still going strong So I'm still in the fight, and that's what matters.
I think
Yeah,
kind of saying that it's good to just stay in the game in endurance racing, if that's fair to say with you.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, no. With the couple of things that have happened over both weekends or both races here that we've had, just being able to be consistent when it matters is the priority. Obviously, something I need to work on is my starts once again, but that'll be sorted hopefully by Fuji next week.
In hindsight, do you think? No, you're fine. In hindsight, do you think that mistake or that lunge for the lead of the race at turn 1, do you think you could have just settled in second place? Do you think you could have kept up that battle for the lead of the race?
I feel like I could have kept up the battle. My pace was on par, if not better, than I'd say the Ferrari. But at the end, it just came down to the mistakes. So on pace, I feel like I could have challenged for the win, but once again, just the mistakes were costly.
Cool. Thank you so much for talking to us. We're going to try and grab somebody else into the commentary box right about now.
Welcome on in, Alexa. How does it feel winning back-to-back races if we didn't get to talk to you last time as well?
I mean, it's pretty nice to have done back-to-back races, but also pole position, lead every lap, fastest lap, and win in both of them. Couldn't really gone much better, could it?
No, it was a dominant performance from you today. Was there any moments where you thought, oh, maybe that was a bit mistake, or did you just end up just drilling into the track, finding where the grip is, and not making any mistakes today?
I think the second stint. So with the way that I ran that race, taking new tires at the start and then double stint in the first set of tires. In the second stint, the car felt pretty, I don't want to say unpredictable, but I just couldn't work out what it wanted to do. Like, it felt as though at times it would understeer a lot. On occasion, it would have a bit of a snap through sunset. So I thought, well, just back it off a little bit, take it nice and easy, hit the fuel numbers that I need to, and then kind of go for it in the last stint.
We've seen a couple of mistakes into turn 17 today. Can you just explain how difficult it is to get turn 17 fast and quick, and obviously consistent as well?
I think the hardest part of it all is really the consistency, because of there just being so many bumps in the concrete slabs. Of course, Sebring used to be an airfield back in the 40s, 50s kind of time, maybe even earlier than that. So the concrete and the gaps between it kind of makes Sebring what it is, but it's a massive challenge. Just trying to get it consistently is a right pain, because you've got to get your braking exactly right, your steering exactly right, you're accelerating exactly right. It's not as forgiving or as simple as many other tracks which have tarmac rather than concrete slabs.
Well, it's been nice having you, Alexa, and hopefully you keep doing so well in the GT3 categories out in the future races. But hopefully you have a good evening as well.
Yeah, thanks, guys.
Cool. So straight into the next interview. What race you have had, Scotland, from start to finish? You had all the ups and you had all the lows, but it ended up relatively all right for you.
Honestly, apart from the end, I'm not actually that happy with the race, because I honestly hate this track. This track is my least favorite track in the game by an absolute mile. I'm so inconsistent on it and not particularly fast.
Do you think it is because of the bumps on the track?
Yeah, it's ridiculously bumpy, and I just don't particularly enjoy it as a track, to be honest. It's not. I don't think it has any particularly fun corners or any interesting parts of the track. It's just a track that exists in the world to me.
And do you have any kind of insight on how Lucas Fisher has gained so much time in the pit stops relative to your much longer pit stop in this race?
As far as I can tell, in the first pit stop he took tires, didn't take any tires in the second pit stop, whereas I didn't take tires in the first pit stop and took tires in the second pit stop, which I think was a mistake because it meant I was on more worn tires for longer than everybody else. But it did also mean that after the second pit stop, I was able to keep up with the top two a bit easier. And I think also just me generally being quite inconsistent with my fuel saving on this track is what cost me a lot of time in the end.
Just to round it on off, sadly we will be seeing you departing us before we really get much time with you. Hopefully next time out you have a bit more of an overall clean and happy experience on the next circuit, but good luck to you for the future races.
Hopefully that's the case. Cheers.
Welcome on in, James. Able to win this one out on track, but how does that last little battle end up feeling for you?
Yeah, I was surprised that it got dragged into that bike because after I got the drive-through pit entry on the first stop, I thought out of the race. I managed to get my head down, catch back up, and yeah, it was a very tight battle for the lead there at the end.
Obviously, 2 races in a row you have picked up a drive-through penalties. Is that something that you're hoping to work on for next time?
Just silly little mistakes that creeped in. Thankfully, it didn't fully cost me today, but it definitely cost me at Bahrain, so definitely going to be ironing those out for the remaining rounds.
But with those little mistakes costing you the penalties, didn't that just make the racing a little bit more fun for you because you were in the pack with the other 2 Toyotas and that 3 wide moment as well?
Yeah, it definitely made it a more exciting race, having to battle through and get back through to the lead.
Cool.
You see that moment here.
Yeah, as we see at that moment, you do get very, very forceful down the inside. Do you think that having to be a little bit forceful was any kind of desperation, or do you think that's fair racing?
I think it was fair racing. I think with us being 3 wide, it was going to be very tight. I tried to leave as much room as possible. I think it's just the net code there and stuff like that just drifted about on the track that caused the contact.
Thank you for the interview this evening. Hopefully you have a good evening as well, and congratulations on winning that race.
Thank you guys, you too.
So that
for coming to this race here at Sebring. This has been the BUSR. We'll be back again next week with the race out, if I'm correct, at Fuji next time. Hopefully a bit more stable. Monza next time, sorry. Hopefully a bit more stable of a circuit even nonetheless, even if it isn't Fuji. But I just love the backdrop of that circuit. You know, that circuit wasn't so bad. But Monza, definitely an iconic circuit out in Italy, home circuit of Ferrari. So I hope potentially James could win the home circuit there for that car, as he has been very competitive across both races so far. But that's going to be the end of it this evening here at the BUSR, and I hope you all guys will tune in next time and have a great evening as well. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.